Hello there, welcome everyone. I am Aaron. I am here with my buddy Robbie. We are going to talk to you guys about Kazuda Odds. Mostly Robbie's going to talk since he is the one who came up with the deck, originated the deck. I haven't seen any other odds Kazuda lists running around. Although we saw at Worlds there was a Kazuda deck in the top 32 and there was an odds deck in the top 8. So definitely something there. We'll see if you guys want to play this during PQs. First, Robbie, you've been playing cards a long time. I know you a long time, like
Yeah.
20-ish years, 20 plus years.
Yeah, 20 plus for sure.
Yeah. And you've always been a competitive player, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you've always kind of been an aggro player. Is that
Yeah.
truth? What do you like about
It's
aggro?
uh things I like about aggro. I love that I'm kind of a slow player. I like to take my time and think through things, and if I play slower decks and matchups that end up really grindy, I'll run out of time, Like I like to play quick matches where I can really make sure I'm making the best decisions possible and not ever feel rushed on the clock. And I also love in tournaments, like if you're doing 8, 10, 12 hours of, games, it's like it's nice to have your rounds finish quickly and get a break between them. Like I absolutely loved, at the Galactics finishing a round, seeing that there were over 30 minutes on the clock and getting a chance to like go for a walk, take a break and like recharge to come back for the next round instead of like grinding down to the last minute, getting a 5-10 minute break and hopping into the next round.
Yeah, I think on the Friday at Galactics, I'm pretty sure we went back up to the hotel room in between every one of our first 5 rounds. It was like, oh, we got
Yeah.
half an hour. Let's go back up to the room.
Yeah. Feels great. So it's definitely a big save on the mental.
Yeah, which is significant, right? Big events,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
wear you
Yeah.
down. Um,
Absolutely.
so when JTL came out, I think if we're talking about the Kazuda Odds journey and where it started, the first like in-person kind of play test jam session we had, you were all over new Han Solo, Han
Yeah.
4.
I I love I love him. Like the conceptually, I think he was like of the leaders, I was like, this is the most exciting leader in the game so far for me. Because I loved a, you know, new aggro, pilot. But having that big turn where it's like turn, 4, you're gonna push 10 resources and just kind of take off just seemed like there's got to be something here. It's gonna be a bunch of fun. And yeah, I just kind of I still conceptually love, and I wish I'd gone back and played more with him in the Legend of the Force meta, because obviously he's viable now, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. We'll circle back there for sure. And I think you started on Han Tarkin Town, and then you tried Han Blue, you tried Han Yellow, you tried all the
Red Hunt
variations.
Green, yeah, I did them all, and
And
he was close. Like they were all. I mean, almost all the colors were solid decks, but he was a little slow for where the meta was at.
yeah,
Um, I think he had a hard time racing against Sabine's, and just it always felt like you had your big swing on turn 4, but sometimes the game felt already lost by that point.
mm, mm, yeah, fair enough. So
The
then,
struggle.
so then you made the pivot to Kaz, and that was just because you felt like that would get you over the top sooner.
Yeah, so Kaz is a lot faster between the two. He gets to run higher value ships. Because he's gonna get to turn off, so you can run the fireball. The Falcon doesn't cost you an extra one. You can get just more on the board sooner. He comes out a turn earlier, and then his big thing is you get to run these, completely overpowered force pumps, right? Where you get to do trench run with no downside, just pay 1+4 attack. You get the, the what is it? Heroic. I can't remember.
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
Yeah,
Is that what it is?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it costs $1. You draw another card. It's 2 damage. It's just like you got this incredible speed. Like it's the fastest deck to just knock your opponent out. And that was just super appealing.
Right.
Um,
And so that fit the JTL meta a little bit better.
yeah, so it fit. It fit because I think part of the like one of the really popular decks was like the Kira Data Vault, right?
Yeah.
And you really wanted to have the game mostly won by the time you know you definitely didn't want them to be able to ever board wipe. You didn't want
The
an
Kira
OB to come out and clear most of your damage before you'd almost killed them. Kazuda being able to coming out faster, doing more damage, like by the time they're over there, like doing their first overwhelming barrage, they're already like within killing distance on the next round with a Falcon or anything, or even just maybe what you have in play.
Yeah.
So it just was like much more appealing on that front.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you, so it was like but to make Kaz, you kind of took the Han deck and just ported it over, yeah? Because we see the odd stuff in there, like Boshek and all that stuff.
Yeah, so kind of what happened is it sort of went full circle. So I actually like going back to the JTL meta.
Yeah.
I started with Kaz, but I couldn't find a way to beat Django at the time, who was the dominant deck. And so I pivoted off Kaz and then went over and was playing with Han because I felt like you had a little more gas in the tank, and that turn 4, 10 resource, like you could potentially get enough on the board to try to tackle him more.
Yeah.
Whereas Kazuda, you were just getting picked off and killed and just unable to kind of play the game. And then after Django got banned, it was like, oh, maybe Kaz is back on the menu.
Yeah.
And but I'd like, some of the stuff we'd done from, the Han Odds deck, like realizing just how powerful Boshek was to keep the gas going and doing all that, just definitely, played into that return to Kaz, where it's like I can still do a lot of these really cool tricks. You're going to go wide. You're going to be able to, shuttle away, units with and have like good interaction while just deploy more units and go fast, but also just the ability to kill them on turn 3 or 4 somewhat consistently, and just being faster than Sabine. Like you'll never lose that race, and that felt really good.
Yeah. So you took Kaz to PQ in Seattle. You had a good run. I think
I went undefeated in Swiss, which was great, and then I did lose out in the top 8 to what I think was just a fairly bad run of luck in my first top 8 matchup, but that'll happen sometimes.
Right. Which feels like which I always am like, I never want to say it was bad luck, but I think you said you didn't play a card for the first 2 turns, like in this deck, which has like 18 plus plays.
Yeah, I had a game where I had 1 ship in the first 3 turns.
Yeah,
because it was the black one, and then the only other ship I drew was another copy of black one.
Right. Yeah.
And then that was one of the games, and it was like I'm deploying, my pilots on the ground, which is never where you want to be as your plays.
Yeah.
And then I lost a game because they drew all 3 of their overwhelming barrages, and it was a Kira Data Vault, and it was turn 4 overwhelming barrage, turn 5 overwhelming barrage, turn 6 overwhelming barrage, and I think I would have won if they just not had the 3rd one still, because it's like a pretty good matchup for this deck. So it just it was a rough loss, but it definitely didn't make me feel like the deck was not good enough. Like I left that feeling really good about the deck.
Right. Yeah, and then after that, I think you posted it in Discord, and I took it to like a locals, and I was like, okay, this deck is fast. Like I played 2 Sabines, and like it wasn't close. Like they were dead so fast. So
yeah, if decks can't interact with you well in space, you're just going to kill them faster than they can ever counter you. Like you're gonna win all the races, and it just feels really. Like if someone just wants to race at you on the ground while you're racing up in the air, you're like, this is great. This is where I want to be. And the other thing that felt really great in the JTL environment is like you just destroy the kind of blue black decks, control decks, because anything that's trying to make you sack a unit, the fact that you can consistently play 2 turn 1 drops just kind of shuts them down.
Right.
And just plays very strongly into all of those matchups.
Right.
Just a good place to be.
Yeah, especially when Kira was the top dog. So I have I can't remember if I shared this with you or not, but this was the deck that you took to the PQ in the JTL meta, and then you can see on the next slide there. I just showed the changes. So when you came back to Legacy of the Force, I think the deck was relatively unchanged. A couple contracted hunters came in, Fang fighters came out of the sideboard to the main, and then we cut down some of our 3 drops to 2 drops to make those slots, and the sideboard changed a little bit.
Yeah, I think the reasoning behind this is obvious. Like the contracted hunters are there because the Han to blue matchup is I was like it's going to be a popular deck. You want to beat that. One of the ways they can beat you is to just flood the board with the restore units and play the healing guy, and if they're able to heal 3, 4, 5 damage and restore, and then play a unit that heals you, like they can keep you from finishing, and end up racing you that way. And if they play like a Yaddle or a Yoda, and then you just throw in a contracted hunter and eat it, and you keep your unit, it feels really good. And the other thing that the deck can lose to, and specifically the Han 2 matchups, is a Poe coming out on turn 4. Because you can't kill them before it attacks, on turn 5, and because they just have one play, and that's the turn you're deploying your leader, and like you'll never have initiative going in that round, and Poe's just going to swing, it's going to kill your leader, it's going to kill a ship, and it's going to just kind of put on a ton of pressure, and so like ideally, like that's the one way you're gonna lose that matchup, and you just need to have a way to kill Poe.
Right. So then it was the 3 hunters, 3 open fires to deal with that.
Yeah. So the sideboard was heavy against Han 2 blue, with open fires, outmaneuvers, and the hunters, because you can kill the Poes, you can sit their board. And honestly, like the outmaneuvers is one of the strengths. Any deck trying to race you on the ground, like if you draw a single outmaneuver, it's almost impossible to lose to any of them, because it's like a time walk. They just don't get attacks for a whole round.
Yeah. So what else? So it has some game against Han. In the Friday when you went 6-2, you played 5 Hans, 6 Hans.
I played 6 Hans, 5 blue and 1 green.
Right.
Right. And like so, had to crush those. My only 2 losses of the day were to Han 2 blues, but I played 5 Han 2 blues. I beat 3 of them 2-0, and then the 2 I lost to were 2-1, and it was close. I think the pre-sideboard, I think it can be a tough matchup. Like I said, if they play a Poe and you don't have a way to instantly kill it, you're probably going to lose that game. Post-sideboard, I think the deck is heavily favored against Han 2 blue because you have so many ways to clear Poe, and you have the outmaneuvers. There's not a lot they can do if you draw. Like I said, one outmaneuver almost seals the deal, and the extra contracted hunters can really wreck their early draw. So it felt like a very good matchup post-sideboard. But, when you have to win 2 games in a row, sometimes you can drop one.
Yep, that's fair. So what else about the Legacy of the Force meta? Like, why else is this deck good into this meta? Obviously, we see a lot of Force throw running around. Cavs got a lot of 1-drop cards in their hand, right?
Yeah, so there's definitely, like, your opponent can't force throw you to clear your units. They have to pitch one of their cards. Because, you don't mind too much. They pay 1 to make you discard 1 card and do 1 damage to your unit. That doesn't kill many things. Like, doesn't feel too bad. So you're definitely, you've got very good answers to some of the strongest cards in the environment.
Mhm.
Um, Similarly, like most of the cool new cards that everyone's playing with all the force stuff, they're all ground units. You know, there's a lot of powerful ground units, and there's also a lot of the play with like the new Vaders and things where people like these units that are very strong to ambush in on things, and if you don't have a ground unit, they can't ambush them.
Yeah.
So it's like two part of you know a you're just dodging the whole arena that all the new strong cards are in, and then also just turning off the power plays that most of the decks have.
Mhm.
And so it just seemed like you didn't get any new cards yourself, but you're just well positioned for what the meta looks like.
Yeah. And then I think another thing too is like the attachments. Like a lot of people were trying to go like turn one guy, turn two General's Blade, or turn one guy, turn two Fallen Lightsaber, and between the Fang Fighters in the main board or the Sanctioners shuttle, like that's just a huge blowout.
Yeah, like if your opponent's trying to go, I play a unit, I put an attachment on it and swing, Sanctioner Shuttle just ends the game. You
Yeah.
know, you played two units, they played one unit, their first they have initiative, their first play is throw a thing on, you're like put a third unit and destroy everything you've played so far and then bash with my two units. Like
Yeah.
that's not really comebackable for those decks. You know, that game's just over on that play. Um and if you can't manage that, as long as you at least have a disabling Fang fighter, you're still in a great spot because you just ate their play and they got no value out of it, and you just kept developing your board. So it's tricky for those decks to race you if they don't put an attachment on. Like you're gonna have if both of you are just kind of going wide and swinging in, you're gonna have your trench runs and heroic sacrifices and your leader coming out first, and you're just going to do damage far faster than they can keep up with. So um it's a good spot to be in.
Yeah. And then I think the last piece too is the other chunk of the meta, and we'll talk about matchups in a little bit here. But the other chunk of the meta was the space decks, just trying to do the same thing that Kaz is trying to do. But I think one Kaz is a little more immune to bombing run with the higher health of the
Yeah.
pilots, which makes a big deal. And then I think it fights into the space decks pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like most decks sideboard action against space is bombing run because they're like, oh, we're not in space, we can bombing run you, and it's great against Vader. It's terrible against Kazuda. I had multiple opponents who were like, I boarded in my bombing runs and I just resourced them because it wouldn't do anything, and I won matchups where my opponents played multiple bombing runs because it's like, you're dropping Falcons that have a 4 butt, you attach any, like a Bowshek on a ship and all of a sudden it's not dying to that. Same thing with the Han Solo, the thing you're pilot on, even just an RD2 on a bunch of the ships put them out of range.
Yeah.
So it's just very difficult for your opponent to clear you with a bombing run. It's going to kill very few pieces of cardboard on your side of the table. So, most decks didn't really have much they could put in, to assist against you. And then, yeah, it's your point against the other space decks. You have some of the higher value space units for the battle. You get to run Fireball, like a 3/3 ambush for 2 is very strong. Because you don't deal this downside. You get a Falcon that can come and immediately attack. You don't have to pay the extra buck for it. You've got your R2D2s to make your ships a little bigger. The Bowshek for big butt, like you can trade in space. If you're picking off their your units with the ambushing and your Falcons, your sanctional shuttles are going to stay online. You're going to be able to knock things out. So you're quite good at the battle in space. And your leader's coming out first to get on there. I think the challenge, does become sometimes they end up with more top end. So you are pressured, like you have probably an advantage in the first few rounds, but you do have to figure out when to pivot from I've got better ships and board control to making sure you're going to their base and finishing them off before they start dropping some of the bigger units that they may have in their deck. But with like disabling Fang fighters main deck, and another one in the sideboard, you're gonna stop them from, at least if it's another big pilot deck, from being able to like deploy their leader and getting good value out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right. So I think I guess we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but like your general strategy, like overall, you're playing 2/1 drops if you can, dumping your hand, kind of reloading with your card draw, and then kind of pushing damage over the top. Is that accurate? And then you've got a little bit of disruption in there if you need it.
Yeah, I mean, you're mostly looking to go as wide as you can right at the start. So even if they have removal, you'll have a ship ready to go to put Kazuda in and apply pressure, or a Han Solo. Um, and your only, like, your main interactions, are jam communications, because there's decks that are going to have, they got their force throws, if they have overwhelming barrages, if they've got their force lightnings. Some decks have fairly heavy event removal, and you've got a useful answer for that.
Yeah.
And then the main piece, you've got the shuttles ground, but you're wanting to kind of enable Tarkin Town, ideally, and that's what the daring raids are for. That's your main interaction. Like, you can spend 1 to kill any unit that's got 5 or more health, and then it's you can kind of keep their early board clear and just kind of guarantee that you're gonna out tempo them. And that's kind of the game plan. And then you just don't really run out of gas, because your deck is cheap. If you get a Boshek, it's probably going to draw you 2 cards. You do have Arm to the Teeth. You can smuggle in, and then a lot of the times, if you spill out your whole hand, and they if they have a discard effect, or you just you drew your cheap stuff and got it out, like, you don't necessarily have to resource beyond 4. You can take your 4 resources. A lot of times you'll draw 2 cards you can play and use all your resources and just keep coming. And so your game plan is to play a lot more cards than your opponent. Where they're trying to curve out mostly 1 card per round. You're trying to play 2, maybe 3, and just end the game before the larger bombs start coming in that you just can't outvalue.
Yeah. Yeah, the Bolshevik does so much work. I had multiple games where I think people are used to it in Han odds, but I don't think they're expecting it in a non-Han deck. So, like, every time I played Bocek and drew 2 cards, people were like, huh. Like, just like, oh. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Mining Guild TIE Fighters also can, produce extra gas. And the thing that's nice is, when you are drawing cards in your turn, like, you have a lot of pieces of cardboard that just give you damage that turn. You draw a Daring Raid, you draw a Heroic Sacrifice, you draw a Trench Run. Even if you draw, Millennium Falcon, that if you don't have one, come in for 3. Like, there's so many cards that will provide immediate more damage. So there's a lot of damage that can come out of your hand out of nowhere. So it's just very, very powerful in that respect.
All right, before we move on to talking about matchups, talk to me a little bit about BB-8 R2, because those are the ones when I played it, I played haulers instead. I'll let you advocate for BB-8. I'll advocate for haulers a little bit.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I like BB-8 because it's just another, it's kind of got multiple use cases. So one is that I generally am trying to make 2/1 drops. So sometimes, to do that, sometimes you got to play a 1/4 droid. And it's not the end of the world, like, if it's not 2 ships, because it's still, like, if you're playing against a deck that's gonna make you defeat a unit, you can still sack that and keep a ship. Similarly, you've got Tarkin Town, so if they are you're going up as a ground thing, it gives you an enabler to basically do a damage and Tarkin Town something. And then on the flip side, it's also, like, it's just another way to push a bunch of damage. Like, there's only 6 or 5 ships, I guess, in this list, of the fireballs and the black ones that it can ready. But when if you throw your leader in one of those ships and then you play a BB-8, that's 6 extra damage for 3 resources. Plus the BB-8 on a ship, you probably tackle, so maybe 7 extra damage. And that's just, like, that's a big swing, that you can get from one unit that is also, flexible as, like, a starting unit. So I like it for that. And I guess the other piece to trying to really play two units of stars, not just the kind of sacrifice effects, but also like I like to make sure Sanctioner's Shuttle is online as a play on turn 2. Like it's a very, very powerful play. Your opponent could not have played a unit that it doesn't hit, as their first play, and to basically just, eat their first play while developing your board more is just very, very, very strong. So, that's kind of my sales pitch for the BB-8 R2. Similarly, at just the 1-cost unit, keep the bodies on the board, and then also like in some of the space matchups, or if you're racing, like just +1 damage that can be there from turn 2, swinging in multiple times. It's free and will often get in 2-3 more points of damage. Again, it can get units out of bombing run range. It can get units out of
let you make some favorable
like
trades.
Attack. Yeah, it can often make favorable trades if you just need to kill the space unit they played. It can make it, one of the more awkward, starts to work around is, a lot of decks are running a 3/3 ambush. If you can make it so your your early plays trade more favorably with that, it can be very nice. Though, the other piece, we haven't talked about quite as much as, or I haven't talked about, is just like Tarkentown just being absolutely amazing in any deck where you're battling in space, So
yeah, I think when you first sent me the list, that was like one of my first questions. I was like, well, if we're racing most decks, why don't we just want 30 health instead of 25 health? And you were like, no. And you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, like the number one ways I was losing games, with the 30 health base was just, someone plays a Falcon and 2-for-1s you. Someone plays a Blue Leader, 2-for-1s you. And someone, ambushes in a Sabine's Masterpiece and, gets value. And if, you're playing kind of wide, smaller ships, and having your opponent be able to get 2 for one of their cards feels terrible. But now your opponent's like, well, I can ambush in my ship, and I will trade my ship for your smaller ship and your Tarkentown, which, not necessarily favorable for them. So it makes you really protected against what would otherwise be the strongest plays to disrupt you.
Yeah.
So.
And especially in a meta where there's so much fighting on ground, that might be the only ship they play the whole game, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It might be the only ship they play. And then even if they play another ship, like if they're coming from a Sabine and stuff, like they're not necessarily going to have another ship they can ambush. If they have, a lot of times it's like they may have one ship they can play that will immediately attack. The rest may have to chill there, for a round, and then you have time to deal with them in other ways. So definitely, you want to make sure that you have ships in play that can attack on turn 3 when you're deploying your leader. The worst feeling is if they've successfully cleared your board and Kazuda doesn't have anywhere to go, and you get to choose between dropping him on the ground and at least getting 2 in, or just sitting on him the next round,
Right. And then just to circle back, I didn't have the droids in my list. I played the haulers instead. I like hauler because in this meta, there's not a ton that kills it. I think the only real threat is force throw, which obviously is a big threat. But with the jams, you can play around it a little bit. A force lightning won't work. No glory won't work. Power of the dark side isn't going to work because you have so many little ships. So it's really only force throw. Most people are not on takedown right now, which is good. And then in the games that you can play it, and this comes back to like the getting breaks in between and whatnot. If you get a hauler down and Kaz on it, like you can just sit back. That game's over. Like there's no way they can absorb that much beats. So yeah, I did have a couple games throughout the event where they got to play it against me, and it was a problem. But overall, I think they worked out pretty well. So I mean,
Yeah.
both good options.
I definitely. I think there are certainly matchups where it's quite strong. I think my fear was mostly around getting blown out. The thing where it's like you play one, they force throw you, they drop it, and all of a sudden had a game. If it had been any other ship, you're not going to lose, and now all of a sudden you're like crap, like this is going to be an uphill battle from here.
Right.
But it also just has one of the biggest butts. It's harder to force throw out, especially if you put a pilot on it. Like, there's and you might be able to turn it off, and then they don't have a good timing on it because you're Kazuda. I think part of my fear of it is just anytime I see it on my opponent's side of the board, I get so happy. I'm like, I'm gonna win this one because this deck has so many ways to clear it out on repeat that it'll always be on your side of the board, and they're just giving you a ship. I don't think I've lost a single game against any deck that's put a hauler on the ground into space against the Kasuda. So that's part of like my desire to not run it is just because of my desire to see my opponents run
Right.
it. In
You
part.
don't want to give that feeling to your opponent where they're like, ha ha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some matchups. We talked about Han already a little bit, and kind of the lines that you want to take into that is if you can get the contracted hunter, that's a great turn 2 play to kind of take out their force unit. Otherwise, you're just kind of pushing damage, looking for outmaneuvered and pose. What about one of the decks that's going to become popular since it won Worlds is Mother Talzin. Did you play many Talzin? I don't think you did you?
I didn't play against any in the. Sorry, I did play against one.
Okay.
And I beat it 2-0.
Okay.
It's definitely it's felt like a favorable matchup. We did some testing with it, and it seemed to perform fairly well against that. Mother Talzin's one of those decks that doesn't want you to go super wide.
Yeah.
Like being able to play 2 ships, they don't have a way to clear it. You're also getting fairly large butts, and you have a lot of pilots. So if they're trying to shrink things, give things -3, -3, and then finish off, like you can often drop an R2 or something and just ruin their plans, or just even a Boshek, or be like the fact that you can increase your health on demand is very awkward for that deck. So they don't get to clear your board very well. And then you also have the jam communications, which is great value at turning off a lot of their removal. And you have a lot of awkward things for them to deal with, like with sanctioner shuttles and stuff on the early drops. So it seemed very, I think, favorable. I probably only played maybe 16 or so games against that total. But I think I won most of them. So it definitely felt like a very reasonable matchup.
Yeah. I think I played 3 or 4 Talzin over the weekend. The only one that I lost to played in both their wins. They played 2 force throws in the first 3 turns. So that was one force throw. The deck doesn't mind. The second force throw can sometimes hurt. So.
Yeah, if you end up stuck with the hand where you only have one cost thing, and the second one actually kills off your board, that can definitely be tough.
Yeah.
But you can just as easily, hit them with a jam, dodge one of those, happen to have one cost things, draw Millennium Falcon afterwards, and still throw their leader out and take them out or whatever. So, but yeah, I think in the current meta, anytime someone gets multiple force throws in the beginning and can have them online, it can be awkward, And I think any deck will run into that problem.
We talked about the other space decks a little bit already. We won't go back over that. We talked about Sabine and other ground aggro decks. Quinlan
Those
and Cad.
you love to see.
Yeah, you'd love to see those. Quinlan and Cad are still, I think, a pretty decent chunk of the meta because those decks are good into Han. What do you think about there?
Quinlan's the easier of the two. Because Quinlan's, what they want to do is play a unit of the same cost, ping you, and start clearing off your stuff. If you play 2 1-cost units, they're not going to be able to enable Quinlan at all. And then you go into turn 2 and you play a 1-cost unit and a 2-cost unit. They might not be able to enable it on that round either, because you'll be attacking the workers units. If they're going to sit back and play a 2-cost and then not, pass their resource just so they can ping in Tarkin Town. And even if they do, you still have your other 2 units. So they have a hard time performing the game plan that they want to be performing. Their strongest unit against you, they're going to have their Falcons and whatnot. But again, because you have your Tarkin Town, they're not going to be able to take out more than one unit with it. Um, and so it definitely feels like you're going to be able to keep presence on the board and put in damage faster than they can still, and outrace them. And I think post board with outmaneuvers, it also, it's a little harder to have the outmaneuver to play against them because they are able to, Kira you, make you just, discard extra cards. It's not like you can just sit on it like you can against some other decks. But similarly, like, you get to turns 4, turn 4 or 5, and you have a play that just says you do 0 damage this round, and it's very hard for them to overcome.
For sure.
Cad Bane can be awkward, and I think it really comes down a bit to your draw and their draw, because you can't necessarily, like, you can't stop them from pinging you. It's not like your 1-drops protect you. Cad Bane's still going to ping you. Some of your 1-drops, have 1 butt, so you can't even open with them as your first one. They're going to be able to pick off a unit with Tarkin Town turn 1. They're going to be able to keep pinging you. You do have ways to increase the health of your stuff. Like, your pilots are quite strong in this one. Your leader on a high health unit can often do a lot of damage. But it's going to be a tougher battle for sure, just to keep your units on board and able to do a good damage. I know this was one matchup where you really liked the stolen haulers, right? Because they just have such huge butts.
Yeah, and if you can stick Kaz on a hauler, then they have like 0 way to interact with it. Before it has your leader, they can capture it with Relentless Pursuit, but yeah, in that they're good. I know it depends a little bit on the build of the cat too, because Randy, our buddy Randy, when we would test into him, he had like so much early space, and he was just wrecking us. It's just like, oh, my turn 1's a space play. I ping off your guy, target down your guy, I attack into your other guy. Oh, my turn 2's a space play. Now I was just like, God damn it! There's no way Cad plays this much space, right?
Yeah. There's definitely like a Cad Bane that's like, tuned to be more anti-space will definitely be somewhat problematic. I think there are also some Quinlan decks that are running 1-drops that might be able to play stronger than you.
Right.
And you also always, I like to say, like, 2 1-drops, so good in these matchups. You can't guarantee 2 1-drops. Sometimes, you get an opening hand, you don't have it, you mulligan, you got to play a 2-drop. Or you only have 1-drop, and you can lose those as well. So it's sort of like your good draws are very strong against it, but you're able to have bad draws that don't play well into it as well. So that's like the other flip side of it, is you can't consistently go 2 1-drops into smash face.
Right.
I think your odds are like you'll do it most games, but you can't guarantee it every game.
And then the last one, which we didn't test against, is Kylo Tarkin Town. Although I guess I should say, at pretty much any blue-green villain you feel pretty good into. Yeah, we talked about Kira already. Kira in the JTL meta.
Yeah. The blue, all the blue green villain stuff, like, those feel great because you're going wider. Their cards just don't answer it well. You've got a lot of damage, and you can pull a lot out from your hand with the trench runs and sacrifices and pilots and armed to the teeth, and they're more equipped for dealing with one unit around that's curving out against them, not I play 2 units, I'm deploying my pilot already, we're going face. It's just too much for them to handle. So that feels good. Kylo Tarkin Town, haven't tested that at all. I would think it's probably reasonable, because if they're throwing upgrades on early units, Sanctioner Shuttles rate against that. You do run main deck Disabling Fang Fighter. You're going wide, so they can't easily remove your full board. And then, like, you're fast enough that, like, Kylo coming out with this powerful turn 6 it's like, your games don't normally go that long unless your opponent has a lot of interaction for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have interaction, but it's not like excessive to the point where you're like, I won't be able to kill you, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I feel like the daring raids, if they open with MiGs, if you sit on a daring raid, like that's going to wreck their first turn, and then you can also play a one-drop ship. So I feel like there's definitely lines into it. I haven't played it at all either. Obviously, this is all seeing their list and seeing how it plays. If someone had sat down with Kylo Tarkentown against me in the tournament, I'd be like, what the fuck is going on here? What am I doing?
yeah.
So
Yeah, they definitely
yeah.
they have the Tarkin town, so they get that extra bit of control. They have ways to do some pinging. So there's definitely some amount of slowing you down. But man, it's hard for a deck to shut you down through turn 6, and it's unlikely they'll have lethal with their turn 6 Kylo flip. They're probably going to have to do it and follow up with one more round, and I'm just not sure they'll stop you for that long,
Right.
because you do have very reasonable interaction for their early units. But yeah, definitely got to test that more.
Yeah.
But it's another matchup where I think jam communications will be very powerful, because they'll just have a hard time keeping your units off through that.
Yeah. All right, and now we're going to return to the start, to your first love, Han for Tarkin Town. It got into the top 8. The list, I think there's a lot of similarities, although this is Magog 29. I'll put a link in the description, but he did an interview with Late Night Gaming as well about the deck and his run, so definitely check that out. They got a little bit more ground in there than your list, but a lot of similar cards. Probably a very similar strategy too, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's very similar to what I had. I didn't put the pose in. I kept the Plo Koons because they came out ambushing, but I didn't have the pose. But I think, my experience with the deck is that it's just not quite as fast, and the JTL meta was had some pretty quick decks. Like Sabine was a lot of places, things were quick.
Mm-hmm.
This one definitely has more gas.
Right.
So if you're not dying, basically, like I found so many games where, like, it became just like a tempo piece. Like you'd have this big turn on, round 4,
Mm-hmm.
but like the game would end on round 5 before you even got to attack with all the units you played on round 4.
Right.
Um,
You
I
you
think
can
that
you can kill them, but it's going to take you 8 actions to their 2
yeah.
actions. Yeah.
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 And so I think, Poe helps with that because he's another giant action. And then I think just like the meta slowed down a little bit. Like you've got these Han 2s, these powerful mid-rangey decks that aren't trying to kill you on like turn, 5 or whatever. Like they're going a little slower, playing more value, having a little more interaction and removal. And I think, uh odds are like, well positioned for that, because you basically are the space deck that gets the most value and gas. Instead of trying to be the fastest, you're just the most, I guess, just the you know and so I think I certainly want to play some more with it, and I'm sad I didn't get in more games trying this after the Legend of the Force, but didn't get as much testing of any kind in this quite as much as I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
think
yeah,
I've got a PQ in a week and a bit here, and I'm on vacation for most of this week, so I'm probably just going to run it back with Kazuda. I think you got a little more time. Are you looking at Kazuda? Are you looking at Han Tarkentown, or are you looking somewhere else?
I'm definitely looking at continuing on these two decks. I love the kind of the yellow, red, white aggro space decks. I think they're quite well positioned in the current meta. Um, they come out fast. They have some interaction. They're trying to arena dodge, but can you know really shut down your opponent, um, on their plan on the ground, and just I don't. I'm very much enjoying them. So I'll keep that up. But the other deck that interested me, I don't know if it's any good. I didn't get enough games in it, but I think Grand Inquisitor with a bit of like aggro in space options as well can be strong. It puts out a lot really fast as well, and it
You're
just
talking Grand Inquisitor from set one, double red.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I played some games with that, and it has the most damage out of nowhere. Like if your opponent ever spends their resources before you've spent yours, like you might just be able to kill them. It can do 17 plus damage from an empty board on like turn 5.
Right.
So it's a little crazy. And it also just I think can apply a lot of pressure, and it can go either arena and kind of arena dodge a little bit, which I like. Um, but I got to do more testing.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I very much like the decks that just come out really quickly and just try to kill your opponent out of nowhere. So it fits my vibe.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Robbie, for doing this, breaking this down for us. Thank you to anyone that's watching. Good luck in your PQs, and we will see you next time.